first started touring? What was the thing that you hadn't expected that was the case?
For your first 5 years, it's mostly about loading trucks and running stagehands. You know, it's not about mixing green day. It's about getting the truck loaded and running 8 guys.
Yeah.
So if you can do that, then you can mix green day.
Cool. The job of monitor engineer. What is the job?
Many compare this to being a toilet seat job. You know, I hate music. I like sound even less, and then noise a little less than that. But the monitor engineer in a nutshell would be, as some people describe it, as a toilet seat, meaning that a toilet seat is sometimes better because you only deal with one arsehole at a time. I'll let you ponder on that.
Yep, everything on stage, yeah. And then do those, make sure we get all those grey beams and big slots. Up the back there, yeah. Upstage chokes.
Sorry, Phil, upstage choke.
Sweep them away a bit forward. Come back a little bit.
No, it's all right. No, that's fine. Happy yet? Yeah, that's fine. Cool. That's fine.
So enough distance between them. That's just an aim, one of those columns up there. All right. Now we just pick out how many columns. All right. Yeah.
We just have to figure out what the change is, and I've told.
started in the morning with chalk marks on the floor, figuring out the points.
This is pretty awesome, but I definitely think I have the right.
You know, there's stacks are in the air. You've chosen your height.
Right.
And as you said, the tuning process maybe more is certainly, while a different skill set,
Right.
perhaps as important, if not more so, than the mixing part, or that's almost the technology part that has to happen before the aesthetics.
Right.
Right. So, how will you go about that? What is your typically?
The first thing to do before you start tuning and optimizing any sound system is you first of all very carefully check every element of it, every individual, a full sound system in a large venue such as this arena includes usually a main left and right, what we call the main system, and some support systems like the side systems, and in our case the 270 systems and the delay systems. But the art and where I want to end up after the tuning and optimizing program is I want to be able to sit at the mixing console and listen to the mains system as my reference, but knowing that all the support systems are balanced and tonally optimized to match as closely as possible what I'm hearing out of the mains system, so that the audience members seated over at the side, halfway around the side, or way up the back of the venue, are getting the same experience as what I am mixing the show to. So to do that, you first of all turn off all the support elements of the system, and you get the mains of the system sounding as good as possible using a combination of voicing techniques and smart tuning techniques, and then you would get the mains sounding as good as possible on their own with all the other elements turned off. Then you would turn off the mains, and then you would tune and optimize the first support system, which is the side system, but you would tune and optimize that to tonally match how you tuned the mains system. And then the same with the 270 support system way round the sides. You would tune and match tonally to the main system, and same with the delays. Then the final optimization process, you would leave all those support systems turned off, and walking around the venue from side to side and up and down the sides, you would then slowly turn on and turn up in level the various support elements of the main system, such that they perfectly continued the coverage pattern of the main system. And we already know that tonally they sound the same, so now the skill is to get them to match in terms of level. So once you have them matched in level, you would then probably go up and set the delays. You start with the delays turned down with a piece of music playing at a nice level. You slowly bring the delays up until the perception of the delays is barely noticed. Delays should never be dominant. The delays are merely used to continue the distance coverage pattern of the main arrays. They should not ever be set as an independent, separate system. Otherwise, the audience's perception way up the back where those delays are covering is they are listening to a show in isolation. They are not feeling the bigness and the grandeur, if you like, of the total show. That's why delays, there's two things important about delay systems. Not only the time alignment, timing them using digital delay back to the main system, but also the level that you run them at. Too loud is too loud and shifts the focus directly to those delays and takes it away from the main system, which is where the source of the show is. And too soft, and they're not doing anything. They're not doing their job. So all of those elements, tuning, balancing, and optimization, are the key that need to be done before you mix a note on that system.
But what's the advantage of the delays? Why not just use the mains?
Well, on a show, it's on a show-by-show basis, the use of delays, really, and it's also on a venue-by-venue basis. On a typical arena venue such as this, which is an average size, pretty standard size arena, not too long, not too short, whatever. If we were doing a modern heavy rock show, in other words, a show running average 100 between 98 to 102 dB SPA, we would with modern technology of line array systems, etc., provided they were rigged and hung correctly and aimed correctly, we would not need delays. But our particular show, the Barry Gibb show, 90% of our show is ballad type songs. So the problem is that once the dynamic drops to produce a ballad song, as it should when you are mixing a show, the dynamic is just as important as the mix of the elements of the show. The problem is that once the dynamic drops to produce a ballad at the appropriate level that a ballad should be produced, the people at the extreme rear of the venue are at a real disadvantage. The show suddenly, in their audible perspective mind, seems distant and far away because the level has dropped to produce that ballad, and they are suddenly feel and are very conscious of the fact that they are at the back of the venue. By using delay systems the way I am, which means the delays are literally so far back in the venue that they are very, very dedicated to only covering a very specific area of the show. They are not designed as overall reinforcement to the rear. They are specifically covering the people at the furthest distance from the source of the show, the stage. So by using them that way, I can extend the distance coverage to those people of the main system. I can extend the coverage pattern such that the people at the rear, even when the dynamic of the show drops, are still getting sound that is in a close perspective to them. So they now always feel like they never drop out of the show. The show never seems way, way down there at the other end of the building. They always get a feeling of that crisp, hi-fi, high-definition sound to the topmost rear seat of the arena.
Cool. Do you have any particular system that you prefer to mix on, or at this point?
No. I would like to think, as should any career-long audio engineer in 2013, you should hone your craft to the point where you can literally walk into any model, brand, style, sound system and have enough experience and enough knowledge and skills to be able to make that sound system reproduce the show that you are going to mix on. And that's, admittedly, that's years of experience, that's a lot of understanding of the way sound systems work, the way sound systems need to be optimized to make them deliver. The key being always the tuning and optimizing of a sound system is designed such that that sound system, without major deviations in frequency response, will produce, especially in the region from 100 cycles to 10,000 cycles, will reproduce exactly what is coming out of that mixing console. That places the creative element of the show right back on the mixing console. All the elements required to produce that show for the audience are now done on the mixing console. If what is coming out of the mixing console is tonally a certain balance with a certain relationship of drums and kick drum and vocals and everything, the sound system, if tuned and optimized correctly, will accurately reproduce that.
Do you rely exclusively on Smart when you're doing that?
No.
Or whatever system, or SIM or whatever?
Smart and SIM and all of those current state-of-the-art measurement tools are just that. They are tools designed to support and get you a better result quicker. But you should never, the limitations of those test and measurement software are that they can't hear the total picture of the sound system as it sums with a particular environment, the large airspace of an arena, for example. Smart is very much dependent on where the reference microphone is, and exactly what that microphone's hearing at one particular point in space. Your ears tend to correlate way better to what the total, especially in the low frequency element, the total reverb time of the low frequencies, etc. Your ear correlates that far better. So what I would do when I am tuning and optimizing is I would certainly get a head start with Smart. Smart will get me in the ballpark. But then I will pick up a known reference mic, a mic that I know what my voice sounds like with. Usually a microphone that is incredibly flat and a microphone that has the minimum of proximity effect. The problem with a lot of vocal microphones are that they deliberately are designed with an incredible amount of proximity effect, and that masks the real low frequency response on when you voice a sound system. You want a mic that is minimum proximity effect and very flat and smooth. So you voice the system. In other words, the good old check 1 2 will tell you, if experience tells you what you are listening to, will give you far better reality idea of what that sound system's doing than just purely using Smart.
Cool. A little bit what it is that we do.
Probably the most significant thing I can recommend is to step back from live sound in general and to make sure you carefully understand that there are two distinct skill sets in live sound. The first skill set is the tuning and optimization of a large-scale live sound system. That is one skill set that is separate and definitely an entirely different skill set than mixing an actual show. Mixing a show tends to be a very creative, satisfying skill set, involves the getting the emotion of the music, the dynamic of the music, the contrasting mood of the music across to the audience. Many guys doing live sound today are very skilled at mixing a particular band. They know all the nuances of the music, they know when the solos are coming, they know the vocal licks, they know how things should sound. But if anything is lacking in their skill set, it is the ability, before they start mixing, to have that sound system tuned and optimized to reproduce what they're trying to mix.
So how do you get good at that, in your opinion?
Get good at that by reading and understanding some of the many reference material available, but also understanding that the aim of a well-tuned and optimized live sound system is to reproduce exactly what is coming out of the mixing console. And so many live sound systems are overdone in the low frequency spectrum to the point that, you know, there is a total lack of understanding that if you allow a sound system to be tuned and balanced such that the low frequency is out of balance to the mid-range and the high range of a sound system, you have done the equivalent of going across every channel on that mixing console and turned up a shelf in the low end of 6 to 8 dB. So that all those lovely flat microphones that you have hand-picked to do the show, and you've chosen a special microphone for the overheads and a special microphone for the kick drum and a special microphone for the vocals and everything. Those microphones, as they were designed and manufactured, the frequency response curve is now not being reproduced because everything that comes out of that mixing console is now biased with too much low end on it. To get low end on something that requires low end, like the kick drum, you should always get that extra low end on the actual kick drum channel on the console. That way you are only putting that extra low end boost and that specialized frequency response on the only instruments that need it. When you tune the system with the biased low end, the excessive low end on the system, you are putting it on every single channel of the mixing console. So you have created a deep hole for yourself before you even begin to mix on that console.
Do you have an overall philosophy that you bring to? Let me ask this in a different way. When does your work start for a tour?
The work.
You start first day of rehearsals, right?
Well, no. The first thing I do on any show or tour or one-off or anything is I look at all the possible inputs that could come at me, and I pad it out somewhat. In other words, if I'm doing, say, a big a rock group, I find out what the instrumentation is, you know, how many guitar players, acoustic guitars with those guitar players, electrics, acoustics, synthesizers, keyboards, bass, guitars, drum kit, how big is the drum kit, how many rack toms, how many floor toms, any other oddball instruments that require DIs, which instruments are DI'd, which instruments are going to be mic'd on a guitar amp. And then I lay all that out in totals. And then I lay it out in terms of thinking about how that is going to, the total numbers of various inputs are going to fall onto my console. One of the greatest things you can do with the current generation digital consoles is you can move and swap channels around. But having said that, it's always ideal that either the front of house or the monitor console is patched 1-to-1, because then any troubleshooting, especially in a emergency situation, is so much more logical to follow. So when you lay that mic plot out that you're going to generate from knowing all those inputs and knowing how many DIs you've got and how many microphones and everything, you think about it in terms of how does it lay into the various layers of a digital console. And I always plan it such that I have what I call a show layer. And it doesn't have to be the top layer, it doesn't have to be any particular layer, as long as within that one layer it becomes my home base layer. And that layer is the layer I am on 99.9% of the entire live show. And it's all the instruments that do solos or have little changes in level required or I need to get to instantly. Usually things like all the vocals, the guitars, the keyboards, the bass. And then on other layers are the instruments that are what I call static, meaning once you have a sound on, for example, the drum kit, it's pretty static. You may want to touch it up or whatever, but if you do your job correctly with the drum kit and you get a drum kit sound, that is a static drum kit sound and can be dealt with on a VCA control fader, which is up on your main show layer. So that things like the drums can go down another bank, things like percussion, again, because within reason, a percussion player is going to hit all the various percussion instruments at pretty well the same or very close intensity for 90%, 99% of the show. They can be static. And the other things that can be static are things that are only used for one little moment in the show or something. So your show layer is everything that is active all the time that you absolutely have to get to immediately now. You want to reduce when you plan out a digital console layout, you want to reduce the number of bank switches you ever have to do during a live show. And how you do that is by laying out the banks on the console very carefully.
How do you build your console template? If I were to look at the board, where will I see the faders? How does that then relate to the way you do your mixing?
Right, the art of in the old days with analog consoles, there was a different philosophy because being all analog, those early analog consoles had a certain noise floor that was quite perceptible. Once you opened 48 channels or something, there was quite a perceptible noise floor. So the mythology in those days was to run the input gain or the head amp gain, as we call it in digital world, was to run that a lot hotter and therefore get the best signal to noise ratio. In modern mixing, the noise floor of the console is so negligible as to be not a factor anymore in modern mixing console design. Even the latest analog consoles, the noise floor is so far down that it's relative to what's come up to the noise floor of the instruments coming off the stage. It's totally negligible. So what I always try to do when I first start a sound check is, for a start, I never do the individual instruments first. And I see many people make that serious error. The problem with that is, once you get, say, the drummer, the classic, you start with the drummer and you say, let me hear the kick drum. A drummer who is not playing with the sticks, i.e. the snare and the hi-hat, is always going to hit just the kick drum with more intensity than he's actually going to play it when his hands are playing the snare and the hi-hat. So what I would rather do is just have the band play all together. And the way I get around that is I strongly suggest that we do the monitors first and we get the monitors going, and then I ask the band to just play a song. And then while they're playing a song, I would put the faders at unity gain, 3/4 travel on the console, and I would mix all those instruments together to create a mix, but I would do it on the head amp gains. Bear in mind now I'm in sound check mode, so I'm trying to end up the art of at the end of that sound check, I want as good a mix as possible of those instruments relative to each other, but I also want all the faders at unity gain, meaning 3/4 travel on the console. Then I have what is called a template mix of the show, meaning that regardless of what happens during a live show, whether there's a guitar solo or a keyboard solo or the vocal balance changes or whatever, at any time during that show, and it becomes way more relative the more inputs you have, especially with an orchestra mix or something like that, I am never in doubt as to where that template mix sits. I can always, when the band plays the song different tonight, or something happens, or I need to change something or whatever, I always have my template mix to go back to. And I know that template mix is going to be pretty close to what the default mix, pretty close to what will sound fine. So you never get that feeling that you're losing control of the mix on the console. And also you get that mix also wants to be perfect gain. In other words, in sound check, when they're all playing together, you keep jockeying and usually turning down the head amps until you get to that magic point where the total mix still sounds absolutely fantastic, but the main meters on the console with all the faders at unity are still not hitting, not peaking into the red, not clipping. In other words, you're getting perfectly usable, good, solid level out of that mixing console. So straight away, your template mix now translates to driving PA systems, drive racks, broadcast feeds, recordings, everything, absolutely perfectly. There is nothing, one of the problems I see at big live shows is that guys end up with a great sounding mix, but the console is literally hemorrhaging with the total level of the show. So, and then they get gun shy about re-trimming back all the head amp gains to get that same mix but 10 dB quieter, because they feel like they're going to lose the mix. What they've in fact done is they haven't got the mix in the beginning, because a mix that is accurate and a template mix not only has all the head amps at a nice trimmed level, the faders at unity, the masters at unity, and the console master meters, the output meters, looking perfectly stable, not overloading and not too quiet. That is a template mix. Anything that is not, doesn't have those parameters to it, unfortunately is not a template mix. A lot of shows end up too loud, not necessarily because the guy mixing wants to run it that loud. He has fallen victim to bad gain structure within that console, and he is loath to retrim the whole thing because he won't get the mix back.